If you found this video, you're probably a horrible photographer. Because why else would you search for why my photos suck? Can I use that? In this video, we're going to talk about 6 reasons to why your photos are not as good as they could be. You're probably sitting at home for a long time now, and what else could it be to do than watch me talk about photo stuff? Tip number 1. So tip number 1 is to shoot during the right time of the day or in the right weather. So what is the right time of the day or right weather? Because some people will be like, when I'm taking pictures of them, they'll be like, oh my God, it's so sunny, it's such a nice weather, we're so lucky. And I'm like, no. So right now we're in Capri, and yesterday it was really cloudy and it was like amazing to take pictures. But now this is like a great example, like we're in a super nice location and you want to take some pictures, and obviously it works, but the shadows are really harsh and it's not gonna look as good as it would have yesterday when it was much more cloudier. Now it's like blue skies, the sun is literally killing me. And well, yeah, this is obviously you can use an ND filter. It's gonna help a little bit, but still, clouds are still my favorite thing in the world right now. Like I used to hate rain, I used to hate clouds, but now it's actually my favorite thing because I'm like, it's great, like great lighting for pictures. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, the clouds are good because it's like a natural filter. So like the light is basically not coming only from one side, but it's basically like lighting you up everywhere. It's like you won't get this kind of shadows like right now, like the light is coming from this side, so like here I'm gonna be super dark. But when you're cloudy, like I'm gonna be lit all the way.
Without being harsh.
Yeah, without it being like looking too unnatural, basically. Yeah, I mean, obviously this is not really an issue if you live like in countries where it usually is like cold, like Ireland or Sweden or whatever you want to live. But countries like Italy or more in the south where it's usually warm, like blue skies is like normal here, so it is what it's gonna look like. Then I mean, in countries like this is better to like take pictures before like the sun comes up or when the sun is going down. Most photographers are gonna tell you like golden hour is probably like the best time to shoot. My biggest tip is to shoot when it's like really cloudy outside. Tip number 2. So like what I see many people do in the beginning especially is that they take the camera and they just like shoot like straight on you, like it's one basic photo. So when you're shooting a subject, my tip is basically to like, if you have a flip screen, like even if you don't have a flip screen, doesn't matter, but like use it. Like don't just like have your flip screen, if you have it, just like make use of it. Like go low with your camera, like make your subject from a lower angle, higher angle from the side. Have something maybe there's like some cool like bush you can just like put your camera on, and then you have some like green, and then you have your like the subject there. Like there's so many things you could do, but like I feel like people get like too restricted sometimes. Using different camera angles can just help you basically change the mood of the picture, just the psychological like feeling of what is on the photo. When I first got my camera, I didn't really know, like as I said before, I didn't know what I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like trying to figure it out. Like I was shooting in JPEG. Like that's definitely like shows that I didn't know what I was doing. But so the big thing was that I was just like, I took the pictures, I put them on my laptop and I posted them. I didn't really think about editing them like in a more like complicated way or whatever you would say. But I know I had like Lightroom and Photoshop, but I just never like had the interest to start like opening it and like experimenting with it, because I felt like I just didn't understand what was going on. Like you won't really make your photos look the extra crisp if you don't edit them. And I'm not saying you have to edit them like a lot, just like adding those extra shadows, the contrast, exposure, whatever, that will boost your photos a lot. Just like the basic editing. And before, I mean, it's good to just like experiment what happens to your pictures. But what I did, I was looking at a lot of videos on like explaining of what exactly happens when I like push the shadow slider. What does that do to my photo? What does it do when I like add contrast to my photo? What does it actually do when I take away highlights? So a good thing is definitely to like try it out on your own, but definitely like try to find someone, like, especially YouTube, there's so many videos about that, just like what every single little thing does to your photo, because then you understand. You're not just doing it like randomly, because it's easy, like you just like do stuff randomly, you're like, okay, whatever, this looks good. But if you just like understand what this actually does to your picture, like you're gonna be able to do so many more things to it. So yeah, definitely try to invest some time into learning Lightroom, learning Photoshop. Tip number 4, don't over edit your photos. I am guilty to that, even still sometimes. But when I started editing like Lightroom, and I was like, wow, this is funny, and I like started like doing things to my blues and my greens, and it just looked so unnatural, and I thought it was look good, but then like now 2 years later, I'm like, this is absolutely horrible. Because you know, some of these people are just like dragging this like teal in the end, and it looks like you're no. The sky is like blue, like almost green blue, and like your face is like red, and it just like looks absolutely terrible. But people think that looks good, or like they drag the clarity all the way to like 100, and it's like, okay, no. It's very easy to just like drag the slide just like really far out, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you understand what it's doing to your photos. So my big tip is to firstly understand what all these different adjustments actually do to your photo. Like, what does the shadows do to, when you add shadows, when you take the shadows down, when you add contrast, when you add clarity, when you add sharpness, like what does that actually do to your actual photo? Because when you understand that, you'll be able to actually edit your photos much better, because you won't really be over editing them too much. Like, obviously everyone has their own style, but when you actually understand what all these sliders do, it's gonna become so much easier to make like a pretty bad picture look amazing, because you understand how you can fix this picture. Because sometimes we're like, okay, let's add a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it just becomes too much. So like, just know your limits. Obviously, like, don't be scared to like drag the slider all the way to the right if you want, because sometimes it will look really good. But just to like be careful with that in the beginning. Tip number 5 is to shoot in manual. When I got my camera, I was just shooting automatic because I didn't even know there was something called manual. But then when I found it out, I just realized how much of a big difference it made to my photos. So basically, shooting manual just gives you more control, and it gives you like more creative control over how your photo is gonna look. The thing with automatic is that even though our cameras are so good today, like some lighting can just be too tricky, like for auto modes to like pick up correctly. So sometimes, like, if you have a subject and the light behind is very, very exposed, then maybe the camera will try to focus on the brighter light, and then your subject will just be dark. Another situation is if your subject is lit up and the background is darker, it might try to like expose higher on the darker background, so like your subject would just be overexposed. And that all comes out to just having more power and control over how your photo and your final product is actually going to look like, because like we all have different styles and we all want to shoot differently. Like some people actually want to overexpose, some want to expose much lower. So like for me, shooting out is not ideal because my camera would just choose to have a much higher ISO, and like the picture would just be overexposed, and that's not what I want as a photographer to look like. So the last tip is to use the right lens for the right situation. That's really hard in the beginning because, first of all, lenses are expensive and you don't really have, like, it's hard to know which lens you want to shoot at in the beginning, especially when you don't really have the knowledge, and especially when you don't really know what one lens does. So when it comes to shooting, like people, you definitely don't want to use like a really wide lens, like a 60mm or something, because you can shoot people, but like shooting someone's face, they're just gonna look like a circle. Like it's not gonna look flattering for a face. So finding out like what focal length is the good, like having like lenses with different focal lengths is definitely something that's going to improve your pictures. Like if you want to shoot landscape, have a wider lens. My tip when it comes to this is that you find out like what type of photos are you going to shoot the most, and then get the lens that with the focal length that is the best for that. Because I got a 60mm and I started this one, and I started shooting like people's faces with that. And then like after a while I was just like, oh wait, their faces just look like a circle and that's not good. So then I got like a 35 and a 50mm, which is more flattering for a face. One other tip when it comes to lenses is that you actually try to find a prime lens. So a prime lens is basically where when you can't zoom in, it's just basically one focal length. And the reason to why you should do that is basically because that lens, if you have a 50mm prime, that means that lens is just specifically made for that one focal length, and it's just gonna be much better quality than if you have like a zoom lens that's like, I don't know, 16 to 70, then there's a lot of focal lengths and the quality won't be as sharp and as good depth of field in that lens. And zoom lenses also tend to be much more expensive, but obviously if you're trying to shoot like birds, you definitely need like a... I hope these tips help you with getting your photos to look even better. And yeah, I hope you have fun at home, because I don't think there's anything else you can do right now. So, and this is Paolo and Michael channel. We do documentaries, we do tutorials of photo and freelance, and football. And that's basically what our channel is about. It's a little bit mixture of who we are. And yeah, last tip, don't shoot with Nikon.